In a battle for her future, she discovers the ultimate deception now. It's time to fight back. My mother's fiancé stole my $7,000 college savings, and my family used my dad's inheritance without telling me. So my grandparents on my mother's side are making me a lot of hate after my mother and her fiancé were detained. I had good cause to call the cops on them, hence this happened. My mother and I never got along, particularly given that my dad died 10 years ago. Right now I'm 7. In a few months, I should be beginning college. I realized I would have to work for myself and create my own plans since, sadly, I knew my mother would never have any money saved away for me. So I started working at 14 years old. After school, I would work part-time. For 4 years, I had been saving to have at least some money left aside. I would also save it as I usually get cash from my relatives on my birthdays as presents and occasionally on holidays. I was really glad to have almost $7,000 saved thus far. Of course, it was all in cash, and I kept it carefully stashed in a small wooden box my father had fashioned for me in a little nook of my cupboard. And my mother never let me open a bank account, hence that was out of the question as I never had one. I never told my mother or anybody else about the money, hence I'm not sure how anyone came upon it. Still, a few days ago, I discovered the box was absolutely empty. When I approached my mother about it, she informed me her fiancé had taken the money to put toward his new property. Finding out what had transpired sent me totally insane. My mom and her fiancé were on one side of the great argument raging in the home while I was on another. Ultimately, though, I am just 17 and they are in power right now, so I had to compromise. So this was my life, hence the only thing I could do was walk up to my room, shut myself in, and spend hours crying as I would have to start over yet once more. Before college, I wasn't even sure if I could save enough money for anything. I felt so demoralized and totally lost. That day, I formed my mental picture. Since it cannot go unpacked, I was planning to exact revenge on them. Though it was a really large choice, fortunately, I was able to extract revenge exactly 3 days later. They have now been arrested and are paying for the crime they did. My sole issue with this whole situation is that my always on my side grandparents are now against me, and it just doesn't make sense anymore. For the past 2 years, my mother's fiancé, I'll call him Rob, has been in my life. I have despised every single second of it since he is simply among the most horrible persons I have ever known. I would even consider him to be abusive. Clearly vocally and emotionally rather than physically. Usually my mother takes the most of it, but sometimes he loses his patience with me too, and says anything that comes to mind. He curses me out, tries his very best to make me cry like my mother, and becomes even more enraged when he discovers I don't care. This causes him to lose even more control of his tongue and what he says. My mother never bothers to defend me. After my dad went away, my mother did not date anyone for the first couple of years. Then she met Rob later. He was polite and reasonable for the first few months, but he began displaying his actual colors after their first major argument. 6 months into their marriage, he had moved in with us and begun controlling my mother. He could hardly hang on any work and was a deadbeat, no-good imbecile. Contextually, he is in his mid to late 30s and still depends on his parents for money, sometimes since he has utterly poor financial sense and wastes more money than he makes. He borrows money from his parents when he is battling with my mother. When he's not, he's comfortable enough leeching off her. The unfortunate thing is that my mother is not quite rich. She brings home a reasonable amount, but not enough to maintain Rob's ostentatious lifestyle. She is a floor supervisor at our neighborhood grocery. Still, I never let it start to trouble me. I always aim to be as self-sufficient as I can. From the age of 14, I have refrained from asking my mother anything except for basics. Not even would I ask her to pay for those once I started working part-time. I really rely on her for shelter and food. I never ask her to buy me anything. That's all. I know that even expecting that is somewhat stupid. Thus, I do not expect her to do anything more for me. From the start, she's made it rather evident that she despises me. She never really treated me well even as a little child, and I always felt as though she didn't even want me. That impression developed into a belief as I grew older. At least earlier, I had my dad to have my back and stand up to my mother anytime she would get too mad at me. But I was on my own once he went away. And that is how it has been for the last few years. Things grew worse when Rob arrived, but I always comforted myself by reminding myself that shortly I would be off to college and wouldn't have to worry about any of this. That feels dark and improbable right now. I stayed in my room and did nothing for the 3 days my money was taken away because I was so depressed. So we moved into our new house the day I found out all my money had been seized. I did all the required work, but I avoided talking to either of the 2 persons living with me, so they seemed no worse for it either. My mother instructed me to get ready for the evening housewarming party on the 3rd day. Having had my money snatched from me, I started yelling at her and told her I wouldn't be doing anything of the such. Their sole means of purchasing this mansion had been the money they pilfered from me. That particularly infuriated my mother. Referring to the fact she had raised me, she advised me to be glad for them now that we were finally living in our own house and not a rented property and should just suck it up and let things go since I owe them for life anyhow. Which is not even logical since she was legally obligated to do it, and it is not like she gave me any great favor. Regarding the house, it was very large for the 3 of us anyway. I knew they had purchased this house specifically to wow everyone with their elegant address and large residence. That day I was quite agitated and chose to phone the parents of my father, something I had never done before. It was complicated as my paternal grandparents had cut off contact with our family when my dad died. I suppose it hurt too much for them to keep in touch. They cut ties and we stopped having speaking terms. I'm not sure why, but I still had their numbers, so as a last resort I chose to phone them since my mother's grandparents, with whom I had a stronger relationship, were really somewhat neutral in this regard. I told my mother's parents about the day my money was taken, expecting they would speak with her and assist in resolving things for me. On the plus side, we would at last have a place of our own and wouldn't have to worry about rent. They just stated they were delighted my mother could purchase a new house. They advised me to hunt the silver lining. Their response seemed strange to me since, up to now, they had always understood me. Though they would silently support me, they never challenged my mother. This time was different and I couldn't make sense of it. I avoided them once more since I was also furious with them. That same day, when my mother advised me to swallow it, I made contact with my paternal grandparents in search of a different answers, one that may provide some future hope. It was only a gut feeling. Luckily, they answered the call, and I told them everything right away. I said I knew they were hurt and didn't want to keep in touch, but because this was an emergency and I thought my dad would have wanted them to help me should he still be alive. So I told them my mother had grabbed all of my savings, which I had been saving for over a few years to cover college. I suddenly had no idea whether that was even possible anymore. After listening to me, my grandfather started something that baffled me. He informed me that evidently my dad left a college fund for me, so he didn't know why I had to save money separately. So that news surprised me as my mother had never mentioned a college fund, and I never asked her since I figured she hadn't saved any money for me. And knowing his death was very certain, I had totally forgotten what my dad might have done for me before he died. So he passed really young, hence I assumed he might not have had time to arrange for me. So I was astounded when my grandparents told me this. Furious and annoyed as well, I asked them whether they had any documentation or evidence I might use against my mother. So they promised to hunt for something and call me later. I stayed in my room attempting to fit everything together for several hours. I came to see that Rob and my mother had clearly teamed together and pilfers my college money to purchase this mansion. From what I knew, my mother did not make enough money to buy the house. Regarding Rob, he had not worked anywhere for the past 3 months. Thus, I strongly questioned whether he could afford a residence of this kind. I would then report them to the police. I simply needed something to validate this. My grandparents finally contacted me after waiting for a few hours and supplied pictures of some documents my mother had actually signed saying she would use the money my father left her to pay for my college tuition, guarantee I had a comfortable life. She had done everything but guarantee that my life was comfortable, so I literally laughed out loud when I read it. She indeed went out of her way to make my life more unpleasant. Still, Mother had signed those papers, and it infuriated me that my grandparents had never mentioned it until. After my dad died, they had simply left me behind, and my mother had not really been there for me. Though I believe it was all a show, my mother and grandparents tried to be there for me. My dad's parents were too consumed in their own loss to give me any thought. My grandparents gave a somewhat poor response when I inquired why they had never shown me these papers prior. At the time, I was too young anyhow. They told me they had sort of forgotten about it when my dad died. And once I grew older, we were not on speaking terms anymore, and it had escaped their thoughts since they too were getting older. I just let it go since I couldn't dispute that. So once I received the evidence, I phoned a friend whose dad was on the force and explained I needed his assistance. So in the evening, just as the housewarming party was getting underway, my friend's father arrived with another cop and a lawyer to arrest my mom and her fiancé. Their commitment had been obviously breached, and the problem was not only that promise breaking, but my mother had essentially opened herself to a lawsuit by straying from what she had promised, therefore breaching the terms of the agreement she had signed all those years ago. My mother and Rob were finally arrested while I was showing the party attendees everything. That felt in my life the most vindicated I had ever experienced. Like several of their ex-coworkers and friends, almost everyone they had planned to wow was appalled as they watched them being revealed and hauled away under handcuffs. They continued to glare at me as if I had done something wrong, too proud and arrogant even then. So when their daughter was being brought away in handcuffs, my mother's grandparents were also at the party and became quite irate and avoided talking to me following the event. I was by myself in the house once everyone had departed and had no idea what to do. Though they had been arrested, they would most likely be released on bail in a few hours, hence I was devastated. Furthermore, it would take months to prove everything even if I intended to charge them. Even then, should they be able to turn things around for themselves, they had a great possibility of being let off the hook. I wouldn't get back the money meant for me till then. There was just no knowing what would happen. I would still be losing out no matter what. The names on the deed were Rob's and Mom's, not mine, hence I cannot precisely sell the house either. I would have to battle the matter with a lawyer even if I wanted to formally compel her to sell the house and pay me the money. Now, since my friend and his father kindly offered to help to organize everything, I was free from concern about the expense of that. They reassured me I should not worry about it as they know what I'm going through and live close by. So now though, I'm not sure what to do. Worse, the few people I had on my side are no longer in contact with me. Because they think I have been unappreciative, my mother's grandparents expressed no desire in talking with me. They stated they knew I didn't get along with my mother, but sending her to jail for something like this didn't sit right with them given all she had done for me. Their lack of desire for any interaction with me truly set me off. I feel totally alone right now. Although right now I may have defeated Rob and my mother, over time I feel like I have lost far more. I simply feel very powerless right now and am not sure what to do. Am I the asshole for having my mother and her fiancé jailed for pilfering my cash to cover their new property purchase? Update 1. Hi there, out of the house Rob and my mother bought. I have moved. I reported them to the police 1 week ago, hence this is why. They were let go after 48 hours of custody and returned home. I opted to depart right away upon learning they would be returning as I wanted no confrontation. So I stepped out when they came in as I had already packed my belongings. Though I didn't want to interact with them, they urged me to stop and chat. I left just as fast as I could. Having previously phoned a taxi, I got in and proceeded straight to my friend's house, where I have spent the past 3 days. For record's sake, this is the same friend whose dad assisted with the lawyer in arrest. Now the lawyer, the father of my friend, and I are collaborating daily to find out how to finish things up as fast as feasible. I am somewhat desperate at this moment, thus I am ready to get to a compromise. In a few days we have scheduled a meeting for their attorney, them and a court-appointed mediator. The negotiations will show how things go. Should they reject my terms, we will have to bring this before court, which could take some time. Though I want it to be fair, I am trying my best to reach a resolution. I want the money I need to complete my schooling. For now, my friend's father has informed me I should expect financial aid from them. But I am reluctant to take financial support from anyone else since it seems odd. Regarding my grandparents, none has contacted me yet. Clearly, my father's parents and my mother's grandparents stopped talking to me straight after they emailed me pictures of the paperwork. Apart from that, we haven't interacted thus far. I have gathered those records from them personally to provide some concrete evidence as well. They were fairly indifferent about the whole situation even when I walked over to pick those records from them. Though they wished me the best, they did not offer to assist me, or even extend an invitation for me to perhaps visit or perhaps interview. Since their behavior has been truly unusual for me to cope with, we really have no idea what's going on with them. So far, things have been somewhat disappointing. Nevertheless, I only hope I can overcome this fast so I may begin college. To be honest, right now I am only going by that. Of course, my friends are being rather helpful, which I truly appreciate because right now I have no family to talk of. Only these folks are really concerned about me. Update 2 high. Thus right now I'm not sure what to say as there has been an exciting development. What I discovered is terrible, hence I am literally shivering with rage. Once more, this is somewhat dubious, but my mother showed screenshots, thus I'm not sure what to believe. What happened was that today, just a few hours ago, my mother emailed me. There were just 2 days left until our mediation appointment. She said she really ought to talk to me. She couldn't get to me since I had blocked her everywhere else, but she opened a new email account and sent me something that truly screwed everything I knew to be true. I will hence not waste time, I will just get right to the point. Against me, my whole family plotted. Indeed, the reason all of my grandparents have been so strange throughout the process is that they have all been in on from the start. So not only had my mother squandered the money left to me by my father for herself, but all of them had taken their fair share and kept their lips closed in return. Because she had dirt on them, I at last know why my maternal grandparents were offended that I had reported my mother to the police and why they always seemed to be worried for me, but never really stood up for me when it came to her. I also now understand why my paternal grandparents had never even bothered to notify me that these signed papers my mother had left existed until I asked them. So my mother emailed me evidence of each of their having been in on this. She spoke with them when I was maybe 14 or 15 years old. She fortunately had all of this on file since they were stupid enough to have these email exchanges. And Mike R. She forwarded me screenshots of these emails. Since I got her arrested, my mother advised me it was only right that I bring these individuals into the matter as well, since it wouldn't be fair for her to be punished when they had all collaborated against me to hide the money and use it for themselves. My dad left a lot of money for me, and all these people, including his attorney, thought it would be better for them to keep it from me and spend it for themselves. This is still unbelievable to me. Over and over, I've been reading that email, trying to make sense of it since it seems ridiculous that all these people, including my dad's own parents, were against me. It's really rather shockingly amazing. Their conscience had finally checked in, they had a change of heart, therefore the sole reason they had notified me about the papers my mother had signed and given evidence recently. So when I phoned them to get aid, they chose to tell me the truth since they understood what they were doing was wrong. Although my mother and her parents had persuaded them not to tell me the truth as it would also bring them down, they had been intending to do this way earlier, although they had assured me they would not come to tell me everything. If I ever asked, they would most certainly be honest. All of this came to light when I inquired whether there was anything they could do to assist. They chose to offer me those records as evidence. Though it makes me happy they decided to assist me back then, it does not clear them. It also clarifies their strange and distant behavior even after helping me out because they were guilty. They are truly ashamed, which they should be, yet they still cannot own what they did. Right now, though, my brain is simply not working as it should. I just know how to handle any of this. I have no idea what to believe in, since it's so vast and practically driving me crazy. I haven't even told my friend about what I discovered. All at once, I feel deceived, hurt, and enraged. Right now, I have no idea what to do with these feelings. Given this is a significant development, and we will most certainly bring this up during the discussions, I clearly have to discuss this with my attorney. Forgetting that she would also be losing out on a lot of things because of this process, my mother tried to flip the tide against the ones who exposed her. She told me all of this, and I'm happy she did, as I believe I should have known that other than a small number of people, nobody has my back on this planet. I guess this is how it is since I cannot rely on anyone. Right now, the only thing left to do is inform my friend so he may notify his father. Then we can all get down with my lawyer and discuss what to do about this and forward direction. Still, I am most sure I will be attending college this year. I am not waversing. I have made my mind. I'm ready to ask the dad of a friend for assistance. Right now, I guess I will ask him to be a co-signer on my loan application. I am not asking him to pay my college tuition right now. Update 3. Hi, so we met with the mediator today, and as I mentioned, I very definitely mentioned what my mother had told me in the email. She basically came clean about everything she had done, and now she will have to pay for the money she and the rest of my family have pilfers from me. She also claimed, though, that some of the money went toward my upbringing, so we shouldn't it against her and shouldn't expect her to reimburse any of the sum taken. I do not buy it, though. My grandparents have to do as well. They stole not only that money, but also my hopes and aspirations. I want them to give it back to me so I may have a dignified life. I am not going to be reliant anymore. My friend's dad and my attorney told me that although these kinds of things are not unusual, they do not diminish the cunning and repulsive nature of it. Like me, they were enraged and properly so. They promised me they would make sure I wouldn't have to rely on anybody else for money my entire life. After my dad died, the type of money they pilfers would have made me comfortable for every single year of my life. Although he had done all the necessary steps to ensure I led a contented life, my family found it unacceptable. They just were selfish, hence they had to be taken away from me. Not that will fly with me anymore. After our conversation, my attorney and I agreed we were going for the throat. Particularly on my dime, there is no need for us to back off and let them have themselves. Though things were somewhat harsh there, one thing is certain: we will be meeting once more, and this time my grandparents, all of them, will be present, as obviously they have also been involved in this. Things might go to court, but I'm going to deal with a student loan till then. I will ensure I get my justice. But more than justice, I have to retrieve from them money taken from me. Since the money was meant for me just and nobody else, all of them had to reimburse me.
Lies, deceit, and a family torn apart. What happens when the truth finally surfaces? My neglectful dad and scheming stepmom tried to steal my home from my spoiled pregnant stepsister, but karma just hit them hard. Recently learning how much I'm 34 make my dad, am 62, is miserably self-centered, generally missing. Unbelievably, he chose to evict me from my own house, all in the name of family. My stepsister in Tiny Gem, Ashed F29, who can do nothing wrong, has miraculously become pregnant. She struggles to find herself a place to stay, as her highly self-reliant aspirations are those of an escort and an OnlyFans model. Now Dad wants everything fixed, and I'm the fixer. I regretfully had to part from my house and my hard-earned money with this woman, since she made all the wrong decisions. The man my dad openly turned off as a duty several times is me. Ever since he learned about my new residence, job, and shockingly low income, though, he has become somewhat sensitive about our shared blood. Although I'm not thrilled with him constantly telling me who my father is, he also wants to deepen the ties I have with his wife and her daughter. I have to stay with her. She is my dad's child as well, but I was banished far too early to establish any type of relationship with the woman. What I'm glad I didn't, since I would have been somewhat let down. I simply want to remind everyone before you all start that I'm here to let out my feelings. I have ideas, opinions, and sentiments to put down. Though you may disagree and they might not sound good to you, I am just letting you know regardless, since, to be honest, I have no one else to tell. Now let me present my half-sister Ash, short Ashlyn. She is literally making her dad proud. She is about 5 years younger than I am. Dad is delusional, as this woman is out there only serving as an escort, sleeping with a bunch of OnlyFans, and my father calls her his pride. You did really read correctly. I suppose he is not familiar with the major deal. Someone is going to tell him, though I'm not too conservative. I try to concentrate on my morals and profession. When I have the time to get to know them better, I court women. There is occasionally a spark, but other elements also play a role, including vast distance and availability problems. Other times, one finds absolutely no understanding. I try not to spend random nights sleeping with anyone. I have to wait for the proper woman. I get sick looking at a large body count. Guys displaying it like a medal is repulsive. I'm not sure why. Still, this is what I live by in my own life. Unfortunately, my sister holds the reverse view. She most certainly no longer counts her physical partners. She is now an escort, which personally repels me. Moreover, it is quite harmful as well. Certain guys enjoy performing odd activities for escorts. I have no idea how someone would view working like that as being acceptable. And she then posts indecent movies and pictures of herself on the internet in order to profit from it. But she finds little success there. She most likely lacks knowledge on how to start the traffic, but for whatever reason it is a flop. From what sources am I aware of this? Here is an awkward story. My friend mentioned it to me. Ash asked him if he wanted to have fun after texting him once following their drink meeting. Hearing the narrative, I had already warmed up a little when the man left with my sister. But he said it was only after he realized she was my sister. He told me she had emailed him the URL to her page, and he showed me too. I'm not sure whether he is speaking the truth. She breaks constantly and begs Dad for money, hence I believe she isn't doing very well. I never told Dad either. I couldn't even bring myself to question her about it straight. I observed her answering a call, then seated in the car with an old man another time. He left her flowers and headed off. She would sneak back into the house at strange hours through the window. This became evident when I used to return home over holidays from college. Though I'm not sure if she is still at it, I do not want to be involved in any of it. I'm glad about having a respectable post where I work. At last, I haven't lived much with a new family since my dad was disturbed enough to send me away any opportunity he could have. But I have seen Ash close enough to claim she follows her mother, Marissa, F58. Marissa thought she was really the icon in her heyday. She was really beautiful to men like my dad and used to be a flight attendant. If you know what I mean, she is now a regular botched face Karen. She runs the sort of neighborhood childcare and has hands like those of a claw, nails longer than her lipstick. Odd how parents would leave their children with someone like that. She could point out a child's eye with such long nails. She is, nevertheless, exactly as pokey as her nails. She loves to create trouble in other people's life and opinions about anything. She has more plastic in her body than the sea and a quite terrible voice. She is as real as phony leather. She affects Dad for the worst. She didn't want to raise a child that wasn't her own. Hence I think she was a big factor in my dad not thinking twice before sending me 8 years to boarding school. Let me then introduce you to my dad. Actually, he is more the main cause of all this. Having lived a complete life, he believes anything he does in life is justified even if it is far from it, since he understands better. He laments having me since I'm not like him. Thank you God, I am not. My mother was a formidable woman. She looked after my dad well and clearly knew her priorities, yet they clashed. I should never forget that she used to tell me Dad was just a different person, not a horrible one. He will always be my dad regardless of what happens. She was a good person though. She didn't want to contaminate my views against my father. Sis. He was, definitely, as intolerable to her as he is now. Few months later, they split and divorced. 4 years old at the time. 2 months after the divorce, my dad then wed Marissa. When I reached 5, they had Ash. Later, my mother passed away in a car accident. She was out to come pick me from school, so I can't forget that. She had always been on time, she just missed 10 minutes once. Though it seemed to me like an hour, it was only 10 minutes. A drunk hit her at a crossroads. He made it, she did not. A few years ago he got a DUI, and I was left alone permanently. I waited in the school. It took them 2 hours to arrive to pick me up. My dad had come, hence I was misled and puzzled. His irritation when he turned to dead-faced Marissa and asked what they should do about me will never fade. She answered, "Your kid, your problem." Specifically, Dad, you cannot now come and tell me I will have to look after your spoiled child. At last I have steady work and oversee some side enterprises. Since I turned 15 I have been earning and have worked quite hard. I started boarding school, then moved to college, only visiting over the holidays. So I started living alone 8 years ago. I recently bought a property after working very hard to reach where I am. This is a wonderful modest house, far better than the apartment I had with buddies. I felt I would never be able to reach this life aim. Actually, I just moved in last month. Although I might not like my family much, fundamental politeness was to involve them in a moment this significant. Thus, I asked them to the housewarming as well. Watching his response was quite depressing. As he inquired about the furniture, the architect, and the interior designer, he seemed jealous, to be honest, a bit annoyed. I'd show you the border what? Deeper spleefy leisure to reunite than you want to go had. Put it, are it weed, to accept it, evil moit, to the percent. When I provided him what I believed was sufficient information, he answered with taunts such as, "I wouldn't know, you never bothered telling me." Trying to get attention and clearly show our weak connection in front of friends and business associates, including my boss. 1 week went by and he called me. I had an intricate job to oversee while at work. I accepted since he mentioned he needed to meet urgently. When I got home, Marissa and puffy, red-eyed Ash were glaring from the living room, and I avoided her. Dad was in the kitchen pulling beers from the refrigerator. He gave me one, and I graciously turned him down, fearing what he might say. When I asked him what he wanted from me, he furrowed his eyebrows and answered another question, asking whether I had lately started complaining about us. Not sure what he was getting at, I scowled in uncertainty. He invited me to hang in the living room with Ash and Marissa. I nodded and turned to settle on a couch across from the two. Ash folded her arms, so Marissa rolled her eyes. Dad came in and sat with them facing me. Leaving his beer bottle on the sofa table, he leaned back. Then he wanted to know whether I was blind. There was a pause, probably bewilderment on my end and rage on theirs. He said before I could reply that I either choose not to notice things that ought to be seen or I am blind. He stated I had most likely become somewhat proud ever since I bought a property and avoided looking at the individuals who really mean something to me. I groaned and asked him what he meant by all of that, wanting that he would be more explicit. He blew sarcastically, then informed me I wasn't disturbed by the dire circumstances in the room. He stated I had elected not to offer or be of any kind of assistance, and that I had chosen not to notice the family was in risk. I obviously asked him what risk he meant, glancing across at Ash, who rolled her eyes and declared she was pregnant. Like any other person, I wanted to congratulate her, but she started crying before I could. Marissa hugged her and advised me to be concerned enough to find out what's happening at home. Dad stated Ash recently discovered she was pregnant, and the lad who caused it had broken up with her since. Marissa also mentioned that Ash has decided to maintain it, hence our basis for next decisions should be based on that. Can she afford it? All I could say. Ash and Marissa stared death at me. To be honest, I meant good. I was worried. I was actually ready to help her, but in my thoughts I had already imagined perhaps they wanted me to contribute financially. Dad then got up and moved over to my side to sit down with me. That's why he called me, he stated afterwards. He added that although maybe my mother neglected to educate me how to be a good brother, brothers would throw their life away for the comfort of their sisters. So, he said he is a nice parent to his daughter. I ask for your effing pardon. I'm not dying for her, but I know my financial input is required. I sighed and asked him what action he wanted me to take about it. He said, "That's my good boy," grinned, rubbed my back. I forced a phony smile, which vanished the instant Dad said, "You're giving Ashlyn your house." "No, I am not," Dad answered straight away. "Yes, that's what I said." Dad scowled and asked me why not. I told him I could help with some cash, but the house is mine. Until she can afford it, I can let her share a room free from rent. Dad got up from his chair, then said, "Nonsense. Dad, it makes perfect sense to me." He insisted, nevertheless, that I not only offer her the house but also move out and buy another for myself. I contended that if Ash is unemployed and expecting a kid, she cannot even afford to run the house or pay the expenses. Those Dad informed me would also be my obligations. Apologized to me, held to the number one. Though I was enraged, I had to be polite. Thus I got to my feet and informed him that it was not feasible and that I would now be departing. I then turned to go. He wasn't content to stop there. 1 week later, he turned up at my place when I was at work. I'm not sure how he entered or where he picked the keys from, but when I returned home I observed men loading boxes loaded with my belongings outside the house. Hurrying inside, I asked them what they were doing, and they informed me the house owner had told them to toss the goods. I said that they should go right away, and that I owned the house, they should get my belongings back inside. I lost my composure. Coming home, this was the last thing I would have predicted seeing, so when I went inside to see Dad and Ash, they still stood there insisting I follow what brothers ought to do. They ignored my advice to leave, thus I informed them I will contact the police. They went at last, bad-mouthing me, applying curses and things. Though I know this is a lot to read, it was much worse in person. 1 week has gone by and I'm posting here since I kind of feel horrible about it. Was I in error? I feel like they need me, and I shouldn't cut them off like this, but I also feel like my actions for them have limitations. Growing up, their disconnection and lack of concern for me infuriates me. Today, they ask me to lay my life down for them. It's a bit much. Not sure what you mean here. Tell me, let me know. I couldn't even get my buddies involved in this. Right now you are all I have. Update. Hey everybody. I hope every one of you is good. I posted 1 week ago, and to be honest I didn't expect the attention it attracted. As the comments arrived, some made me doubt a number of things. Not too long afterward though, I decided not to break off my family completely. This came about via Ash calling me. I welcomed her by telling me she wanted to see me. She wanted to tell me a few things, therefore she asked to meet at my place, but I was still getting used to the scenario made last time. I urged us to meet somewhere else. She was first somewhat nervous when we visited a coffee shop. She seemed somewhat unlike herself, but generally she is rather conceited and unpleasant. She told me she had lately been broken off with as we sat in the corner. I answered, claiming I had an idea since Dad mentioned the man who got her pregnant had left her. She shook her head and said Dad believes that. She told me that although Dad believes her BF left her due to commitment problems, in fact she is the one with the commitment problems. Unbelievably right? Right? She said she truly loved this man, but he had discovered some things about her just a few days before she told him she was pregnant. She spoke first, therefore infuriating him, even though he wanted to address her about those things. In that instant, he became rather insane and drilled a hole in the wall. He frightened her, she claimed. He then said he was divorcing her and left without hearing her reply. She has been trying to phone him non-stop, but he hardly reacts. He has only once texted her back, advising her to let the child go first and inform him. He will only talk to her at all then, but she has to part from the child to have that opportunity. Now I know Ash ain't a saint, but this man. She remarked it would be strange to tell a brother about the topics I just questioned her about. I shrugged and stated that it's okay if she doesn't want to tell me, since I kind of realized she was most likely referring to the OnlyFans and escorting. She pulled in a great breath and let it out before I could ask her what she wanted to meet for. She then told me she had been engaged in dubious activities. Though I truly wanted to hear validation of all my doubts, I was concerned. She told me she wanted to paint and be an artist, but Marissa informed her she wouldn't get a decent life or income from it. Ash was advised she had to start looking for a man right now. She first felt disgusted as she soon enough began attracting the attention of elderly guys. She told Ash that it was a good thing when she informed Marissa about it. That is, the older males making any money at all, knowing what to do with their money. At the time, Ash was just 19, and Marissa informed her college she would not or could not provide a decent, pleasant living. Ash had youth. Many would have paid for it. Ash resolved she wanted to be a model. She tried several modeling agencies, but none seemed to be interested in her. She then ran into a man in his 40s claiming he could land her a job. He purchased her pricey outfits and jewels for the functions and drove her to gatherings. She was content till her first gig was mentioned. She turned out was selling her time to a man in order to pay for a modeling contract. She spent the evening as she assumed it would only be dinner. That was it. She did have a little modeling contract where she photographed a little brand. A few more men used her while she was hoping for a gig in exchange, but she was informed they chose not her. She then discovered that the man making investments in her was actually profiteering off of her. She was terrified he would have her killed, hence she considered it foolish to face him. She then informed him she was fine with low pay and that she no longer wanted to pursue modeling. He fortunately let her depart without any problems. She then attempted to wait tables in bars, and it proved rather difficult for her. Ash, hard-earned money is exactly what that is. Still, she also mentioned that Marissa would make fun of her for opting for those tasks. Marissa would explain that women should be taken good care of. They are the beauty of this planet, and should just be there to shine and smile like a showpiece. Ash began to go out with men just for supper, but she charged for it. She claimed that although many loners out there simply wanted interaction, too many ended up with stalkers and obsessive males believing they were owed more than what they had paid for. She started escorting when she realized that interacting with men and having them feel close to her caused more trouble than sleeping with them. It worked great until a friend mentioned OnlyFans. She tried to get it rolling, but her editing and camera handling were not particularly strong. She wasn't social enough, thus that didn't work either. It takes a lot of effort. She next ran across her lover, BF, an ex-coworker. He returned often because he worked as a barista. Although he was too clingy, she really liked him. He also lacked trust in her and was a bit possessive. Given that she was indeed still on OnlyFans and an escort under his unaware knowledge, he had every reason to question her. Perhaps started looking after her with the meager income she made when she stopped escorting and left OnlyFans totally. She seemed good with it, Marissa wasn't. She then fell pregnant and her boyfriend discovered everything. As she mentioned that a couple of the individuals on the list might be possible fathers. Every one of them donated money to help the child and her. One of them had even proposed to her, but she knows all of them are doing since they believe they are the only ones there, which is silly given she is an escort. She does not, however, tell them straight out that. She pays her expenses and most likely helps with the kid. She said she decided to tell me all this since she couldn't tell Dad. Dad believes she has only been modeling here and there, makes little money, and that she had one man in her life who left her. Marissa mostly understands when he should have stayed. She advises Ash to wed the man who proposed and let him believe he is the father. Ash doesn't know though what to tell Dad. She also doesn't want to let anyone believe a lie and wants not to wed the guy since he is strange and ancient. She mentioned that some financial support would be great and that she wanted me to make up with Dad. I asked her what she wanted me to help with. She advised me to consent to what Dad asked and then spend some time away. I could then return when things are less contentious. How then is that a solution? I politely turned down her offer and informed her I could only provide some money. Nevertheless, I wasn't comfortable leaving my own residence. She then informed me I lacked the least bit of decency to assist her out, that she exposed her entire existence to me, and that I was selfish thinking like way. She stated even Dad was correct about me, and I deserved to be sent to an orphanage, instead of taken in when I needed somewhere to live. She stood up and stamped off. Though I believe my response was not too severe, is it selfish? Actually, what do you believe her side of the tale tells? Does it support her expectations? Should I trust her? She seemed to be speaking the truth, but does it follow that I should follow her advice? Tell me, everyone. Update. Right now, this is what is picking at my brain. A few things have transpired after another week. I assumed I would hit the keys and notify you all about it. I appreciate your help on my earlier update, gentlemen. Having folks back up my ideas for once is rather relieving. Still, Dad called me once I met Ash, but he wanted to meet with me at the pub to sort out a few things. Interested, I agreed and went to see him. He mentioned he knew how much I was making as we sat at the counter. When I questioned him about why it mattered, he stated he knew I could afford to buy another property in a few years. I shrugged and said I already had a house, thus this conversation ought to be quite over. He maintained that since I didn't yet have a family and that single women find it more difficult to raise a child, that child needed a safe place he could call home. I reminded Dad then that Ash had been living with them long enough and that nothing seemed to be an issue. To be home, a small child won't harm. I also asked him what she would do, pregnant, living alone in a big house. She needs to be surrounded by others so that she could be looked after, I remarked. Dad surprised me once again at that point. He said Marissa, and he would move in with Ash into my house. Into my house. My hearing let me realize something. The bartender laughed sarcastically before I could react to that. Dad objected and inquired about what he found so humorous. He said Ash. She uses everyone, he remarked, then tosses them away. He nodded, declaring he was her lover when my dad questioned him about who he was referring to. My eyes opened, so this was the man. Dad balled his fists and asked the man why he felt it was acceptable to establish a family he couldn't sustain. He spoke angrily. Holding his hands up, the man informed Dad he had no bearing on the family in issue. He also showed no desire in rearing a child not of his own. Dad pushed him to say why he felt that. He grinned and explained that although Ash still got pregnant, he had a vasectomy last year, since he didn't want any children. He also discovered her driving off with several males following her lies on her whereabouts. Then he learned she had an OnlyFans page. He found none of it believable. That was the last straw for him when Ash at last told him they were expecting, and he couldn't have a child, hence it verified everything. Knowing this, he told Ash she had been cheating on him all through. She let the truth fly free. While my ears were focused on Dad's voice, all I could see was his face moving from wrath to disbelief to disappointment. He shrugged and informed us she owed Ash money, time, honesty, at least love. He owed nothing else. He stated he was unsure whether Dad knew any of it, but he knew no dad would be ashamed of a child like that. Dad stiffened his lip, got off the stool silently, and turned away. He texted me later that evening, saying he had to go get Marissa from her yoga session. I'm not sure what happened after that, but I'm sure it was something as Ash was at my door, sobbing the very following day. I wrecked everything, she informed me. To stifle a scene, I drew her inside and calmed her down. I told her I told Dad nothing. It was her boyfriend, the bartender Dad and I had visited. Then she told me Dad advised her to stay at home and stop everything. He claimed he never expected she would turn to such methods and felt disgusted by her. He advised her to pick a decent man and straighten her behavior. He also noted that these days her chances of meeting decent men were somewhat limited. I hugged her and listened to her. Dad had just returned from seeing me when he confronted her, so she stated she was sorry believing it was me. I forgave her, then she returned home. She added that Marissa was really quiet when Dad was discussing wonderful women and their loyalty, like she couldn't say anything, while she was raging and telling me how terrible she felt. Ash stated it's among the topics Marissa avoids talking about. She answered that Marissa couldn't have an opinion since she's yoga, so I asked her what she meant by that. I could only grimace in perplexity before Ash carried on crying as she related what else had transpired. Yoga, said Ha, stayed with me. Actually, what do you suppose happened? Will Ash still be Dad's pride source? Nobody has approached me ever since. Still, I will see and let you all know. I know y'all probably didn't expect me to get back to you so soon, but I couldn't help it. Update 2 days after my last upload, and I am here for the ones inquiring. Although Ash's ex's name is not important, we may call him Bob. This is the fresh bit. I saw Dad the day before yesterday. I informed him I had some decisions made. I said I was ready to let Ash use a room and I wanted to assist raise her child. I would be fine paying for the diapers and other supplies, but she needs to start working right away. Dad informed me then that nobody would be with the kid, hence I advised her to attempt working from home or freelancing. This time, Dad wasn't his usual nasty self. He stopped and then let out a sigh, telling me he felt I despised him. He settled on the couch. He was correct, but I probed him about his reasoning. Mom despised him too, said, which was why. She never said that. I told him fast. Instead, she constantly stated Dad loved me and worried about me. I told him the only reason I felt let down at all was how inaccurate my view of Dad was. Mom told me all that. Then from Dad I sensed only absolute neglect and lack of caring. But opening his eyes, he confided in me he loathed himself for many ways. He stated he liked Mom, but they hadn't known enough to determine whether they were really each other's type. He sighed and added he had to marry her since he got her pregnant. Though he never felt the spark between them, she was a good wife to him. He next crossed paths with Marissa. I could feel my insides tingling at that. I remained motionless. None of this was known to me. Dad told me Marissa sparked a flame in him he never knew he possessed. He caught emotions before he knew it. He was quite delighted with her. Marissa became pregnant too before he could negotiate his way through rights and obligations. She was pregnant, therefore it was too late, even if he informed her it was bad. He urged her to wait. But he wanted to tell Mom first, but Marissa came to our house feeling nervous. She reported everything to Mom. She explained everything to Mom. Dad took it when Mom challenged him. Mom was really hurt in this quite unpleasant episode, yet even then she remained courteous and requested Dad for a divorce. My parents separated. Y'all Dad had an affair with my stepmom and got her pregnant. I'm not sure just how much worse this dude could be. Dad stopped and glanced across at me. He stated he had to return me home after spending a good year with Marissa when Mom passed away. Marissa despised every aspect of it. Again, driven by guilt or something, she was worried that Dad could put me before their kid somehow. 3 years later, he sent me off to boarding school, and subsequently, I never had to remain home long enough to cause Marissa any trouble. Love makes you do stupid things, he remarked, and I wanted to punch this man in the face, but I restrained myself. Turning back, I found Marissa standing in the gateway carrying a water bottle. She claimed to be just heading to the yoga class. Setting her bottle on the table, she headed into the kitchen. I blinked, then she was back, and was through the door before I could think clearly. Numb, hence I followed her out. I grabbed her water bottle to give back to her. She had already got in her car and was leaving when I came out. To help me to relax, I silently sat in my car and gently drove after her. She pulled out from parking outside a yoga club. She turned to glance around her and then began down an alley. She once more turned around and climbed into another car. She kissed and hugged the driver, and they headed off. I was hardly able to blink. I locked my jaw, parked, got out, and entered the yoga club. When I asked them about Marissa checking in, they denied providing personal information. I insisted I was at least told if she were there, saying I was frightened about her. They informed me they had no customers under that name. I returned to my car and waited. I have no idea what came over me, but I started filming when the second car rolled in, then slapped her butt as she happily headed to the parking lot. When a man got out and opened her door for her, hugged her and kissed her. For yoga, Marissa, so much is different. I left before she arrived at the parking lot. My dad cheated on my mother, thus he is currently being cheated on as well. Karma is. Dad has phoned me several times, but I didn't answer. All I want right now is go and question Marissa about it, so I'm going to see what happens. Should I change? Hello y'all. I believe this to be most likely the last update. And I know it's a week late, we all anticipated it to be sooner, but so much occurred this week. I first managed to man up in Marissa. I went when Ash was asleep and Dad was not home. Was she scheduled for yoga that day? She claimed to have it every day, on Sundays included. Cooking spaghetti in the kitchen. She was who was her yoga teacher, I asked her. She chose a name at random. Was that a guy? I asked her. Saying no, she chuckled and asked, why would I take a boy? She had a female instructor at the club she visited, so I told her it was odd since none of the other clubs had female instructors. She corrected me, but her voice startled me and her hands were no longer swirling the pasta sauce. They told me I had joined the club yesterday. I told her that. How could I know where her club was? She asked. I informed her I visited last time following her. She let go of a spoon. I grabbed it and she spun around. What are you getting at? She asked. I then informed her what I observed. She disputed it as was natural. I mentioned I saw it with my own eyes. She shrugged and said Dad would never accept me. Oh, at least he would believe his own eyes. I told her after pulling out my phone and running through the footage. She stood stunned and spent a minute not speaking. Her face then relaxed, and she carried on cooking noodles. She stated it was useless now. She was already preparing for a divorce anyhow. My eyes grew wide. This woman was horrible. My dad deserved all of it, granted, but oh, she's a serpent. She informed me that her sweetheart of 3 years ago is the man she visits at the club. When it was safe to do so, they resurrected their passion. She stated they had fallen in love long ago, but at the time he was wed to another woman whose father had employed him for his business. Though there was a lot at risk, Marissa and her boyfriend decided he should keep his marriage intact and handle his money. He would then split from his wife and live with Marissa. But Marissa became pregnant, and as women should, she was trying to pin a man down for support. She made that decision to hang around Dad. They were seeing one another on and off. But Marissa chose Dad and told him he had to act when she met her boyfriend and got pregnant. She had to handle things herself since he developed cold feet, and that's when she spoke with Mom. She's good right now. Her partner is a widower and has a business. She said women should do what they can, kid, and turned around smiling. Her smile stopped though, as she peered over my shoulder. The next instant her smile vanished. I turned back to see Dad in the gateway with flaming eyes and clenched hands. He was shaking. Dad awakened Ash then and carried her to the kitchen. Who was her father, he asked. She shook her head and glanced across at Marissa. She assured him she always recognized him to be her dad, thus she didn't give Blood any thought. Pacing the floor, he ran his fingers through his hair. Marissa and Ash were instructed to leave his house 2 days later. The divorce is underway. At a shelter are Ash and Marissa. Dad has requested me to locate him as a therapist, and he has been rather quiet since. I pardon him every single time. Regarding Marissa, her boyfriend didn't bring her in. He disputes having ever spoken with her. Marissa has begged me for the proof. I have it. She even begged me to consider Ash through her pregnancy. And what can I say, Marissa? Your child, your challenge. From what standpoint should I act? Either destroy the footage or hand it up. Oh, I'll let others know in the comments soon later. I appreciate you joining me and for your ideas and encouragement. It means a great deal.